Thank you very much, Sophie, and thank you very much to the whole Plunet team for having us today. We're super happy to be presenting some of our work. This is quite a long-winded title to just talk about the work that we do and why we want to start a 4 billion conversation. So as you can see, we're CLEAR Global, but some of you might have known us before as Translators Without Borders. We've sort of shifted away from that name. It's still very much part of our brand and part of what we do. But we are now CLEAR Global because we do more than just translation. And without further ado, I'd like to start with a simple statement, which is at the origin of why we want to start this 4 billion conversation, which I'll explain a bit later what I mean by that. Going back. Behind every failure to help, there's a failure to listen and to understand. What I mean by that is that it's great to be able to share information, but if you can't get an answer back and if you can't actually understand the need that's in front of you, then how can you properly respond to it? Melinda Gates says it very well as well. She says that the day that we stop listening to people is the day that we stop being able to make the world a better place, and that's definitely something that we want to be able to do. And how do we do that? I'm going quite fast, so yeah. On the screen, you can see a few names of tools, of technologies, of things that you might have been using in the past few months/years, which were probably something you couldn't imagine about 10 years ago or 20 years ago. You've all heard about Alexa, about Google Translate, DeepL, all of these different tools that seem to be available for everyone and accessible for everyone for free, or at least their basic version is available for everyone. It's incredible that we now have access to technology that is voice-enabled, that you can just ask a question to your phone, to your tablet, to your computer, and you will find an answer. You've got access to Google, so whatever question you might be asking yourselves, you just type in some keywords, some few words, some questions, and you'll get some information about what you're looking for. And so my question here is it really accessible to everyone? And I'd like to see, maybe if you guys are not sleepy yet, and after that nice lunch you're still with me, by show of hands, can people raise their hand if they do not speak English at home? So if the language that you speak with your families or your partners, your children, might be something else than English. Okay, I think it's fair to say that it's more than half of the people here. But because you're here today and you're listening to me and you understood the question, I'm going to assume you speak English as well. And so that's definitely an advantage that we all have in this room. Now, I'd like you guys to think about a situation, a scenario, where some of you might have come to this conference by plane or by other means of transport, public transport. I want you to imagine that you're in an emergency situation. I want you to imagine that you need potentially life-saving information, and that information is shared with you in a language that you don't understand. You will need to resort to some kind of translation mechanism, probably trying to get through machine translation to get the message that you want to get. And if you've been in a plane, you know these kinds of messages of where to find the exit, etc. We've done something similar with this message that I'm going to show on the screen in just a minute. Essentially, we got a life-saving message translated by professional translators into their native language, and then we back-translated it into English using machine translation. And this is the life-saving message that you got. So if you speak Hausa, which is a language that's spoken by over 40 million people in the world, depending on what sources you use even more, this is the message that you would get. Air pollution is under your control. Put it on top of your head and tie it to your body. You can only ventilate the air when you leave the boat. How about that? Does that make any sense to you guys? Is it life-saving? Will you be able to save yourselves if that's the message that you get? Probably not. Now, we did the same thing with Lithuanian, which is a language that's spoken by about 3 million people in the world, and this is the message that we got. You'll find a life jacket under your seat, put it over your head, trim it to your straps, inflate the vest only after leaving the aircraft. Now, that sounds a bit more like something you would hear in an actual emergency situation. Where am I going with this? I've talked about all of these tools that are available, presumably to everyone. But if you don't speak English, or if you don't speak one of the main languages, or the languages that people have invested in for all of those technologies, then it's useless to you guys. And so we know today that out of the 8 billion people on this planet, 4 billion people don't actually speak some of the dominant power languages. So over half of the world's population doesn't have access to information in their own languages. That could be information, as I said, that would be life-changing or life-saving, but it could be anything from health information to, I don't know, any random information that you might find on the internet and that someone's already talked about in English. In majority, this affects people who come from a more rural background, maybe less formal education, maybe they speak a language that's underserved, underrepresented, and that hasn't been invested in massively. And that represents half of the world, and that's where those 4 billion conversations come from. I'm going to give you a few different scenarios. This is Halima. I met her in Nigeria. She's a farmer. She works with her crops, she sells it on the market, and she's heard about this new fertilizer that presumably would be helpful for her to grow a harvest. Now, she's heard about it, but she doesn't know anything about it. It costs a lot of money. She doesn't know if she should use it or not. And all of the information that she can find is in a language she doesn't understand. Well, she might as well just not find that information because it's useless to her. Another scenario, also a bit daunting, Jildiza, she lives in Kyrgyzstan. She lives with an abusive husband. She's got 2 daughters. She wants to find information that would potentially help her get out of that situation, find the right resources, who to speak to, what to do in that scenario. She goes onto the internet, can't find information in her own language. Might as well not have found the information because she can't access it, she can't do anything with it. This is the kind of gap that we want to bridge, the gap between the power languages, the languages that all of us here in this room speak, and the ones that are lower resource languages, languages that are not very well represented. We believe at CLEAR Global that this is one of the greatest opportunities to do some good in the world. You might have heard about the Leave No One Behind principle, which is guiding the Sustainable Development Agenda for 2030. And the idea is that we don't want to leave these people behind just because they can't understand English or some of the power languages. By that I mean anything like French, Spanish, Chinese, any of the languages that you might be speaking. So how do we do that? How do we bridge that gap? First of all, we build technologies and we collaborate with some of our partners on the ground, some of our communities on the ground, to make sure that we focus on the languages that have the greatest impact. These pictures are all from Nigeria, but we also work in a lot of different countries where we get feedback from people. We try and work in languages that are meaningful and impactful to them. We do that to then be able to deploy those applications, those tools, right back to those people that actually need them, and to have these conversations about the most urgent challenges that they might be facing. It could be, again, anything about health, anything about climate change. It's a very broad scope that we work with, but it's all urgent and life-saving, potentially. To do that, we build some playbooks. So we work together with our partners and with different tools that we're building to be able to reach those 4 billion people and start those conversations and make sure that we hear from these people as well. We work with a community of linguists, which you might have heard about, so the Translators Without Borders community, to get the conversation started, to hear from their feedback, to give them directly also empower them and give them the tools that they need to be able to develop in language services if they'd like to. We work with the tech. We've got, so as part of CLEAR Global, we've got a whole branch of our work that's dedicated to the technology, to building it, to working on it, improving it. And finally, we work with our partners. So these could be small local organizations, but also bigger agencies that you might have heard of. And I'll go back to that a bit later in this presentation. When I talk about the community, what I mean is our community of over 100,000 volunteers who have registered on our platform. These could be people that speak more than one language, but it could also be someone that can do DTP, subtitling, post-editing. So I'm not saying translators because they're not all translators, and as a matter of fact, most of them are not translators by training. But we work in over 200 languages through this community of volunteers who are donating some of their time to deliver the language services that we provide to some of those partners. We do it for the programs that we support with our partners in over 80 different countries. Again, different topics, different areas of work, but still the same goal and the same aim. And we do it for the technology. Some of the work that we do is actually building parallel data sets. So some of you who are well-versed in MT, in machine translation, will know what this is. Essentially, it's having source text and target text and making sure they match together so that we can train engines to work in some of the languages for which you don't have that data available already. The internet is full of these resources in English, in French, in Spanish, again, Chinese, maybe even Russian, but not so much when you talk about Lingala or Bambara or Urdu. And so what we do is we try and feed that bank of data, those data sets, to be able to work with machine translation also in those languages. A few of the tools that we've built over the past few years include what we call tiles. So this is the touch interface for language-enabled services. It's a very long name for what is essentially just a screen in a little container, a little protected case. This is something that you can put wherever people like to gather. And what's so great about this is that it doesn't require any access to the internet. It's essentially a little tablet that people can access. It's been used in different contexts, but one of them has been in India with one of our partners in the Bihar region of India, where we launched it with Gramvani, and essentially people could go on the tablet, speak to the tablet, get the information that they need or they want through that tablet, and also give some feedback, so record themselves sharing some feedback about what they found out. For most of you in the room, that's not going to sound amazing because you're used to Google Home or Alexa or talking to your phone to ask a question, but I can tell you when you live in rural India and you can speak to your machine in Hindu, that's just bonkers, that's just amazing. And that's the feedback that we got from people as well, was that they never thought they could actually do this. Something that seems so simple to us and that we're doing on a regular basis was actually nothing short of amazing in those contexts. You've got some stats on the screen. Most of the people said that they trusted the device, that they trusted the information that they could find, that they would use it again, and that's been really great feedback for us. We hope to be working with this in a lot of other different contexts, but this is just one example. Another example is the one that we've worked with in Nigeria. So we're building AI chatbots. This one here is called Shehu. It was deployed specifically for the COVID-19 pandemic to work on dissemination of information about vaccination. What we think is important is that people can also use the tools that they are already using to be able to find information. This chatbot, it's available on WhatsApp, and that's what most people on the ground use already. So they're used to going on WhatsApp and talking to their friends. This is what it feels like when they talk to Shehu. They feel like they can just talk to someone that's real. Obviously, we know it's just a chatbot. But they ask a question and they get a response. And they do it in Hausa and Kanuri, which is not something they thought would be possible in the past. Again, most people we've gathered feedback from have told us that they actually trust information, that it was correct, that it was valid, and that's been something that's really worked for us in Northeast Nigeria. We're on the second version of this chatbot, and we hope to develop it even more and in even more languages in the future, provided we get funding for that. Going back to what I just mentioned about machine translation, we want to give everyone access to all of the internet, regardless of what language they speak, just like you and I have if we can translate everything back into English. For that, we need to build those parallel data set that we talked about just before, but we also do some community-driven data collection and validation. That's a bit of jargon to just mean we get information and we make sure our community goes through it, checks it, validates it or not, evaluates it essentially. One of the projects that we're working with is with Meta, that you might know as Facebook. We're working on their machine translation engines into Hausa and Kanuri. So they developed those models, they shared it with us, we then put some documents for translation through those models, and then we share that back with our community of volunteers who then check the information and tell us whether those machine translation engines are working or not. And if they're not, obviously they need more training, and we feed more data into it, and we hope it gets better with time. The idea is that we want to have machine translation as part of the workflow for more languages than we currently do, making things faster, easier for everyone, and not just for those major power languages. Obviously, this is not something we're doing on our own. This is a collaborative initiative. We work with a lot of global major programs in the world, big partners in big languages and smaller ones. We also work with a lot of tech companies, a lot of AI for good initiatives, as well as some more small, grassroots, tinier, local partners. Again, as I said, it's not just us, it's really something that we hope to advocate for, but really anyone can help on that initiative. I was walking yesterday by the Berlin Wall and I saw this picture and I kind of thought that would have been a nice one to end on, and obviously I had sent my slides already, so this is a bit different, but here it says, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And on that wall, what it says is, so many small people doing small things in small places, but they can alter the face of the world. And that's actually what I'm here for, to tell you guys that you can be part of it. Hopefully you take something back and in some way you'll be able to help with this. How can you help? Some of these answers are obvious. You can follow us on social media, you can go on Facebook, you can go on LinkedIn, you can go on Instagram, you can subscribe to our blog, you can join our community if you've got any language pairs that you work with or any time that you'd like to donate. You can definitely do that on our platform. You can also sponsor or support us with in-kind donations. We are super happy to be here and to have been invited by Plunet. I know that some of our supporters are also in the room today. I'm thinking about some people from Phrase, some people from RWS who we've been collaborating with one way or another. You can fundraise for us. I think some people might have heard about Ludejo and what they're doing for the Gala conference where they're fundraising for us. And obviously you can take pictures at the photo booth that Plunet has put together and use the hashtag Language Matters and PlumeSum 2023. And we'd be happy to see your photos on social medias. If you've got any questions, if you think that might be an area where I can, have a conversation with you guys about it, then please feel free to write my email and to get in touch. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.